Okay.
You done good, Casey.
Yeah. All right. Then let me set my screen up here. Hi, Rick. All right. I think we can maybe get started here in a sec, and then I'm gonna throw up my slides. Um, is that what I wanted? Yeah. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, friends. Good evening. It's good to be with you on this Thursday afternoon. I'm not sure if it will storm at all during our time together. It might storm, may not. I already sort of heard the wind outside my window, at least, but we'll see what happens. Um, just for, I guess for the sake of the recording later on, it's good to be able to talk about AI, and I think thinking about some of the cost associated to using AI, as well as if there's a place for using AI in the context of our various ministries, whether we're a pastor or an elder or we're someone else filling in in a church role. So we're going to take a look at all these things this evening, and I think I work best going through this. If you have questions, to I think there's enough room on my Zoom preview screen where if you have a question, you can raise your physical hand or type it in the chat, and I'll see that. And I like to sort of just answer questions along the way, so we'll sort of see how that goes. So talking about AI, basing it off of one of the motions that came from the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy from this past General Assembly, algorithm and the Almighty. And during the course of our time together, I'm going to sort of break this out into a few different sections. Going to talk about what is AI? What are we talking about when we talk about AI? Thinking about a theological framework for how we might consider using AI or not considering using AI, and thinking about the costs related to it. And then also looking at some examples that if you were to use AI in a ministry context, what that might look like for you. So, a couple icebreaker questions, I guess, up top here is well, one, and feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat or raise your hand for this first one. Have you used an AI tool before? If so, you can raise your
Well,
hand or say what it
uh,
was.
yeah, I've had good experiences with Chat GPT.
Hmm.
It has helped me solve some things that not church related, just at home and around the house, or answer questions. So I'm just generally trying to get more. I'm trying to embrace AI rather than run from it.
Okay. I think I saw most people's hands go up. Is there someone who hasn't used an AI tool before? Okay, Margaret, I see you. And then perhaps another question that you might all feel free to answer really briefly is what's the first feel that comes to mind for you all when you hear AI? What does that evoke for you? Does it evoke a feeling or emotion? Molly?
Yeah, I'm very conflicted. I don't know if that's an emotion. I'm bad with emotions. But like,
Conflicted. I'll take that as an emotion.
yeah, I mean, I think there is good. I think there's like the piece of not wanting to be left behind. And then there's like a lot of ethical dilemmas that come alongside it. And so I kind of hold those in tension.
I've seen too many
Hmm.
movies like Idiocracy and futuristic stuff, so I'm apprehensive. I feel like it's invasive. I don't know. I've barely used it. I asked a question about gaff tape when I was as a theater major, and so it led me down this huge. And I was like, wait, I am talking to a machine. I don't know. I've got
Yeah,
lights in my house that come on when I tell it to. The first thing I got was an iRobot Roomba. But yeah, this is. And I'm one of the youngest members of Molly now, I think, in the Presbytery, and I'm like an old fuddy-duddy. I'm just like, I don't know about this stuff.
Yeah,
It feels
I
like
feel the fuddy duddy. Like, sure.
it feels like folks are trying to jam it down my throat everywhere I turn.
Yes, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's hey, let me choose. Don't
Yeah,
shove
I
it
mean,
on me.
right.
You know,
So
but
even if
it's
you,
been
Because
very
I want to
helpful.
write an email saying yes, you don't have to help me.
But if you're trying to figure out a problem or how to solve something, it's really helpful. So I enjoy using it quite a bit.
but I think one of the examples I think Carol mentioned also, I mean, you can't even Google something online now, right, without it providing you an
right.
AI summary, without giving you the opportunity to look through some links. So okay. I think all those feelings of it being helpful, of it being conflicting, evoking a conflicting feeling, skepticism. I'm not going to ask Sarah where she stands on AI because I know where Sarah stands on AI. But we're going to cover, I think, all those things tonight. And I will say, as much as I talk about AI, I still am someone who has a lot of questions as well. I think for me, probably one of the things you'll see and hear me talk about in terms of AI is I think we as a country are still very far behind compared to some of our European siblings who have a lot more legislation regarding and regulating AI, which is, I think, for me, a part of my apprehension about embracing it fully here. But we'll get to talk a little more about that this evening. So going to do a little bit of a brief introduction of AI, artificial intelligence, and you might, and to give a little context of where this inspired this training this evening was one of the items from General Assembly from the Reformed Identity in the United States, item 8, Algorithm on the Almighty, which was a document put together which was really meant to help shape how we think about artificial intelligence, using artificial intelligence, the implications of it. But I'm sure Sarah has heard me mutter under my breath as I heard them debate. What it revealed to me, though, is I don't think we really know what we're talking about when we talk about AI. I think in hearing a lot of the conversation that came up, I think there was a lot of, again, these are my own personal takes, but I think there was a lot of generalizations that were made, confusion about what AI is, and I think just falling into some of the marketing lingo that we've just become so accustomed to when using AI. Because and so that item came out to be a little more anti-AI, I guess I would say, than perhaps what it was intentionally meant to be, which I think has some implications for us as we think about artificial intelligence, because it is this umbrella term. You know, artificial intelligence is anything that is just meant to mimic or try to accomplish a task that you or I would be able to do. And you'll see that there's a lot of, there's layers to what artificial intelligence is, and we're going to get to that because I think it has a more refining piece for us as we think about how we should use AI. Because if we were to look at artificial intelligence or to think about whether or not we should use artificial intelligence, I think it's just interesting to look at, for example, how over the course of our time, artificial intelligence has appeared in a number of different ways in our lives, even before what we're using today. So whether it be how people set up the first mail sorting system in terms of identifying handwritten zip code that were written on mail, whether, you looked at IBM creating a supercomputer that could defeat a chess professional, that shapes how, we use AI in video games or gaming, thinking about, as well as Rick said, having a robotic vacuum, in my case, a vacuum that vacuums and mops. So, having these tools that utilize AI really before I think AI became such a buzzword or a marketing term that we find it today. I mean, even looking at things like how Google Translate introduced artificial intelligence to improve its language translation, to think about how Google Maps used it to improve how it gets you to places based on real-time traffic data. These are all things that utilize artificial intelligence, but perhaps we don't think about it as being artificial intelligence. And it brings me to this quote, at least in thinking about artificial intelligence for this evening, that resonated with me. Nick Bostrom, who's a computer engineer, has this quote about how artificial intelligence, we stop calling it artificial intelligence as soon as it's become something that's just become a part of our daily lives, and we don't think about it, and we just don't label it as AI anymore. So for example, the system that sorts my mail, I don't think about that as being AI. I don't think about really even my vacuum being AI, or all these different pieces. I don't think of it as being artificial intelligence because it's become just such a normal part of my life. So perhaps as we think about artificial intelligence, maybe the better question for us, and you'll see how this relates to the chart I had about the different layers for AI, is maybe the better question for us as we think about it, how we interact with artificial intelligence, is how do we discern, how do we govern, how do we responsibly use generative AI, our large language models and the image tools, and how we use them or not as we make that choice to interact with them. Those might be words you're not familiar with, which is okay, because we'll get there in this next section as we talk about what is generative AI. I think a lot of the conversation around artificial intelligence nowadays, and especially in the item from General Assembly, has to do with generative artificial intelligence, which is, again, this subsect of artificial intelligence falling under that big umbrella, which falls, I think I heard Ed mention ChatGPT would be an example of generative AI, or Claude, or these other kind of tools that let you create images from nothing, or make music from nothing. I say nothing in air quotes because how those models were trained is, raises a whole lot of other questions about how they ethically or did not ethically acquire that training data for them. So generative AI, though, is, I think, what we're going to be focusing on this evening, because I think it's the one that we hear most often in terms of like the news and social media and schools and all these kind of different contexts, as a tool that, again, can be beneficial or not. It's something we'll have to sort of figure out. But to give a very crash course of how these tools work, they work in sort of a way to predict or anticipate what you're going to say, or it's trying to predict what comes next. So if you give it a sentence, the sky is, and you want it to finish the sentence, it's going to try to predict, try to reason what the most likely word is going to be. So in this case, it's going to think that the most likely word that you want it to complete that sentence with is blue. This is a real simple example, but if you're asking it to do more complicated things, what I tell people then it's so important to remember is that the quality of the answer or the quality of the product it's going to give you is so very dependent on the quality of the input that you put into it, which is why I think I always feel a little baffled when people talk about generative AI as being this silver bullet, so to speak, as being this tool that's just going to fix everything. Because in my mind, you have to put just as much time getting the kind of answer, the quality of answer that you're looking for. I know there was a lot of talk about, using AI for sermon writing. If I just asked it to give me a sermon, like 1,500 words on the feeding of the 5,000, and that's all I gave it, it's going to give me something that is maybe passable, but it's not going to be good. If I told it, though, to write a reflection based on, all these different, basically writing it out for myself in a way that's just more of like a word vomit, so to speak, it's going to at least create something that's a little more closely related to what I'm looking for, compared to just giving it a one sentence answer, which is why I think the quality of what you put into what you're looking from AI is so important if you want something quality out of it. I think one of the really interesting things, though, about generative AI is this question of whether or not we really understand how it works, because I think the answer might surprise us in the sense that we don't fully understand how generative AI works. So there's a couple of videos in these slides that I'll send to Donna. So if you want to watch these videos on your own time to learn more, you can. But you know how we have been given these wonderful little neurons in our brain by our creator that make this whole crazy network and webbing of things that make up our brain? Well, generative AI has its own version of that. And so we might be able to give it some kind of task to do, some kind of task to accomplish. And by the time it gets to the point where it's able to complete that task, we're not really sure like what happens in the in-between section. We know the beginning and the end, but we don't really have a full picture of what happens in that middle space of how it gets from A to B. Because these models and these things have formed these complex neural networks, so to speak, in order to form thoughts, not for themselves, but to try and get the answer that they're trying to get to. So there's that video and another video if you wanted to go back. And I'm not going to get too into the weeds on that now. But a couple of these tools, I think, if you wanted to play around with them to get a feel for what they're like, there's free versions of them if you wanted to explore. I know Ed mentioned ChatGPT. Another one is Claude, which is, so ChatGPT is made by a company called OpenAI. Claude is made by a company called Anthropic. I used to use ChatGPT, but due to sort of more, due to my personal sense of ethics, I've moved away from using anything OpenAI related to using ChatGPT or to Claude, Anthropic's Claude. I would rather use an AI that at least wasn't part of a company trying to build AI weapons, but that's me. That's me. But so those are a couple examples of some of the mainstream tools that are out there. I wanted to give this is like such a broad overview and introduction to AI because I wanted to try and help at least clarify a little bit what we're talking about AI and to at least lay that foundational framework for as we begin to ask questions of what does it mean for us as Christians or as disciples or as people created in the image of God to use AI, to have that kind of at least very basic foundational piece. One of the things, at least for me, that I found an interesting, if you're looking for some more summer reading, I do recommend the encyclical that was put out by Leo XIV, Magnificent Humanity, if you're looking for the English translation, which is a papal encyclical that addresses what AI looks like, or how we interact with AI in this new age and safeguarding what makes us us. I think there's three core claims that as we think about AI usage in our lives and in the church that are important for there's three core claims in this encyclical I think that are important for us as we think about what the ethics of using AI look like for us, which is that Leo talks about how technology isn't necessarily evil, but it's also not neutral, meaning that there's people who created these tools, and as much as we would like to think that AI is just made of bits of code, and so it must be impartial and unbiased, they are still shaped in ways by what their creator values. And so as we use these AI tools, it's important to remember that we're also not getting a purely non-biased answer. It might look that way for something mundane, but as we begin to dive deeper into asking more ethical or philosophical questions, that's where we might run into, having to ask these questions for ourselves. AI also, perhaps it should be said that it can't simulate a person and it can't be one. There's things that only you or I can do. AI, at least from my perspective, is a tool, and I don't ever intend for AI to replace the work that I do as a preacher or as a presbyter. I'd be out of a job then, I guess, in both those cases. But there's a piece of that, though, where AI doesn't possess that God-breathed conscious, that moral conscious that you and I possess. And then lastly, one of the core claims I think in this encyclical is that the faults that are present in you and I are not things that are necessarily meant to be ironed out or perfected. I think there's pieces of our humanity that are flawed, but they're pieces of our humanity that contribute to this overarching story of our own growth and our own journey in figuring out what it looks like to be a child of God in this wondrously made yet crazy world. And so to try and pursue something that would like stamp that out or flatten or iron it out, I think is something we should be very cautious of. So those are three claims I think that are important from the encyclical in terms of how we think about artificial intelligence and using it. There are, though, I think, in terms of those frameworks Leo lays out, I think there's important things to think about in terms of the spiritual and psychological costs of using AI, which is that it really predicts what you're trying to get to. It doesn't know, and it doesn't believe, and it doesn't care about the things you and I believe or know or care about. It's just an algorithm that's trying to get you from point A to point B, and whatever falls in between, it couldn't care less about that. I think it's still an issue for AI today where it's a bit syncopatic, or I'm not going to, I know I said that wrong, but it wants to keep you engaged with the platform. It wants to keep you engaged with using it. I recently went back to ask, I think it was ChatGPT. I went to go ask it just out of curiosity what it thought about a recent sermon I gave. Well, you know that I'm one of the best preachers out there. And I asked to push back and be a little more critical, and it was, but it was still framed that criticism in a way that really was a little more sympathetic, or wanting to make me still feel like what I said was really amazing. And then lastly, again, as we talked about, AI is still really moral by someone else's standard. Again, is something that Leo touches on, is the fact that AI, even though it's this model that's out there, it's this tool that's out there, it's still made by people like us. And we know that if we were to make something, that it would probably be instilled with our own morals and ethics as well. So I think it's something to be aware of in terms of the spiritual and psychological costs. But then there's also real physical costs to AI. There's the energy and the water costs. There's I have a couple of videos, or I have a video at least in the slideshow if you want to look it up. But still, the countless numbers of stories that we're hearing in places in rural America and the places where they don't have the influence to protest the building or construction of data centers, where their electricity rates have 3-4 times increased. Places where people who rely on well water have found that their wells have dried up. So there's a real energy and water cost to using AI, which makes it a little more sickening when we think about how a lot of the data centers that we're still building are really speculative. It's not that we need them, but we think we are going to need them. And so it's not like they're even things that are being used today. There's also a human body cost still to artificial intelligence. We think about the technology that goes into it and these pieces of computer equipment that require rare earth minerals, and the people who are mining these rare earth minerals and the conditions in which they are, again, being acquired. And there's this also sense of a new colonialism, a sense of our information that is being collected and has the potential to be exploited at record-breaking highs. I don't know if you saw recently a news story about a man who just wanted to take a Pilates class at his local gym. And so he asked his AI bot to make a reservation for him. And the AI bot instead hacks into the gym and starts unregistering people so that he would have a spot in the class. So there's a lot that goes into how we think about the cost of AI. And this is just one of the videos about from a news organization, More Perfect Union, about a woman's experience living next to one of Meta's or Facebook's data center. Again, that's going to be in the slides if you want to view that later. So as we think about AI, then how will we develop for ourselves, ethics to use AI, generative AI, whether we use it for ourselves as a person or as a church, and how will we think about how we can advocate for making the kind of systemic changes that also need to be made? Because I think for me, as someone who views AI as a tool, as something that can help alleviate perhaps some of the more mundane administrative pieces of my life that I could spend doing something that's a little more soul-giving or, useful to someone else. What are ways so that I can find ways to use AI in that way while also trying to be an advocate for making the changes I think need to happen? Before I go on, because I'm talking really fast. Are there any questions or are there any questions or are there any pieces that are on anyone's mind at this point?
I think along with your costs and along with the moral and ethics it is the moral and ethics of the wealthy and the elite. I mean, I think the most recent story I heard is that they're buying rare books and then consuming the content and then destroying the books. So that they no longer exist. And that is very concerning. And so I just think about that when it comes to cost as well.
I'm a little bit curious. My understanding is we train models by feeding them a lot of existing stuff. So if you ask it to write a sermon, is it going to come out like an evangelical sermon? Or, I mean, what is your experience with the theological bent of the existing models?
So it depends, right? I mean, I think I've put in enough inquiries into it where it knows my theological bent, so it would probably be able to generate something a little more closely or I could fine tune it by asking it within a prompt. But again, it's sort of what you were saying also, though, and what Molly was saying, though, right, is that AI, as we think about how these models were trained, a lot of them were trained on data that I'll say is stolen. It's whether it's books that were copywritten or even sermons that are published online, it just scrapes the internet for as much data as it could find, so that it could be trained on. And so I think probably what you would find if you started from a blank canvas is perhaps a more theologically, what I would say, maybe evangelical, but more neutral sounding sermon. And as it got to know you, it would probably make tweaks based on what you were asking of it.
That brings to mind.
But I wouldn't use AI again I wouldn't use AI to craft a sermon from scratch.
Yeah. No, it trains us and we're training it. Like I've realized how I pitch questions to Alexa or to Siri or Google. I'm training, and it's like, wait, I'm training you, but you're now training me, and that I'm changing how I'm asking you what I'm wanting to get out of you.
Yeah, because
I just say things to it just to mess with it, like weights and measures and volume of this, or how many cups are in a bag of flour or something like that. But it's like,
for me, it makes me more conscious of the words that I choose to use, and so I could be more specific with this word or I, could choose to type it out how I would normally otherwise type it out to someone. But yeah, I mean, AI has also gotten to a place now where they've scraped so much of the information that's out there to be trained on that it's perhaps scarily being fed its own information back out again. So it's now this sort of cyclical cycle of training, which has not produced great results. But it also, it raises a lot of questions. I think, yeah.
And to Molly's question, like again, are we creating a new class warfare? Are we creating like with the TSA, and you can go if you pay enough money, you can go through pre-check. If you pay enough money at the amusement park, you can go through this line faster. If you pay enough money, that you could do, and the people, the marginalized, the left out, the gap is getting larger in the class warfare.
Well, I think I have two other concerns. A, I'm feeding it all of my data and my information, so it's learning from me, but and I'm not getting incredibly, anti-government in my AI conversations, but is that going to turn back on me at some point in time, and then I go down some conspiracy rabbit holes? But the other piece of like, despite how well it's been trained, how incorrect it is often. I wanted it to create a 52-week Bible reading plan where it divided the Bible perfectly, and without fail, it had like 62 chapters at the very last week, and I was like, this is wrong. And I would do it again and it would still be wrong, and it would still be wrong. One time I asked it to show me the Statue of Liberty next to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar based on the biblical things. And the statue of Nebuchadnezzar was like 3 times the Statue of Liberty, which is not true in the slightest. And so it's like, you have the information, and people are treating it as if it is absolute truth a lot of the time, because there's not that piece of backup.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and what Molly raises, I don't touch on it in this presentation, but the use of AI to generate artistic pieces of content, such as pictures or anything else like that. I once led another workshop where I talked about helping people to discern the news media that's out there, and helping them to think through, pictures that they see on their Facebook feeds. And it was really interesting to see, just with my basic limited skills at the time, I was able to create a convincing enough news article headline with a picture of everything like that people weren't really 100% sure as to whether or not it was a real headline until I helped them work through like what they should spot. Those are, I don't know if Sarah believes me, but I'm not full into, I'm not an apologist for AI, but I'm also not someone who is fully anti AI. I still sit somewhere in this weird, uncomfortable zone of trying to figure out what the use of AI looks like for me. And Carol will know that, I have AI glasses that let me preach. I have because they let me have a teleprompter in my glasses. So I love being able to look up and make eye contact with people when I'm preaching instead of looking down at my manuscript. So, Carol, did you have something else, or?
Yeah, I guess the other place where I've noticed, again, because of training, if I'm looking for something that changed, AI fails me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's going on what it learned from the past. So, there was a particular golf thing where I knew things had changed in 2026, and AI kept giving me the old data.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to move a little bit into how, with all these pieces, and as we're still all together trying to figure out how or if we do at all use AI in the church, things I think to consider and things to avoid. I was leading recently a workshop on AI and preaching. I was working with some lay preachers in terms of how they might use AI to help them do editing or to help, think through a passage differently. And someone brought up this really great point during that workshop, which was, the reminder that AI doesn't have a soul, and it's not spirit filled, so to speak. Which I think is a helpful reminder for us as we think about the use of AI in the church and it not replacing some of those things, or replacing those things that are really meant for us to do. But there are ways, I think, though, that AI can help in some of the pieces that we do in the church, regardless of what our roles are. I do think, even though it can be a bit syncopatic, I think it still can be an interesting conversation partner. For example, I was preaching a sermon on the feeding of the 5,000. How many sermons have we heard on the feeding of the 5,000? How many times have we preached a sermon on the feeding of the 5,000? And I was just looking for any kind of new approach to that text. And so it gave me an opportunity to just brainstorm perhaps some different ways that I hadn't thought about it before. We could also, and I say this very don't trust it, treat it like an unpaid intern, which is you can use it as a jump off point, I would say, to help you find something, to help you research something. I still recently went back to, I think it was, again, because I wanted to see if it got better, and it wasn't. I went back to ChatGPT to ask it for some favorite quotes from one of my favorite theologians, Gustavo Gutierrez, who wrote Liberation Theology. And I said, I really want to pull, a quote from this book. And I asked it to give me some quotations. And the page, it just was making up quotes. And when I pushed back on it, it said, well, it's in the spirit of what he would have said. And I said, well, that may be true because it sounds like him, but it's not from the book. I have a copy of it right here. So just use it. If you were to use it that way, use it as a research assistant and just verify everything that it says. I have found that Claude is a little better than OpenAI's ChatGPT, but I still double check everything, triple check everything.
Wait a minute, Casey. Is the misquoting of the liberation theologist because that was copyrighted material and AI couldn't get to it directly, and they were kind of dancing around that?
That's a great question. Really... I have tried it with a couple. Yeah, no, sorry, Ed.
Well, that's phenomenal. Astounding what you're saying is that they were kinds of synthesizing quotes from somebody, but maybe because of,
yeah, I would have thought that, and it still might be the case, but I had gone online to look at least for, because you could still find website versions of the book that are, I don't want to say they're legally out there, but there are web text versions of the book that are out there that I figured if an AI was going to scrape it, it would have scraped it. But I knew there was enough out there, though, at least anyway, where it was writing in a style that sounded a lot like him. Because I was like, oh, that would be a great quote for the sermon that I'm looking for. And I was like, oh, you made it up. Again, it might be better for, it might be more accurate on some things. And in this case, I got unlucky. But I would still always want to double check if I could find a hard copy source just to make sure. What do I have here? You could use it as, again, not trusting fully what it produces, asking it for a first read of something. You could ask it to help perhaps craft. I know Molly said she hasn't had a great luck with it, asking to craft a plan to read the Bible. But there are ways that you can leverage AI in a way to do that. Also, I have used AI sort of as a more refined grammar checker. Friends, you don't want to read something from me that has not been edited. So I do use it as an editor, and at least the model that I have for running it through, it knows, I've run it enough times and instructed enough times in terms of it not changing anything but grammar. It's in a place that I feel happy with. But for me at least, I use it as a more advanced word checker. Okay, we're going to break out though into some examples of AI as well that you can afterwards. I think at some point I'm going to send these links to Donna that you could go around and play with if you would like to. Some tools that I have built for you if you want to have some fun. You can access them on Claude, and you can make a free account of Claude. It's free. You don't have to have a paid version. If you just hit your limit, you just have to wait a little bit. So no worries. But I wanted to show at least some examples of ways that you could use AI in church as well. So for example, I have this tool that lets you sort of optimize what you have from a sermon, for example. So if you're preaching, what are some ways that you could sort of get the most out of your sermon? So for example, here, if I just copy and paste, let's say I was really ahead of the game and I had a whole sermon finished, I could just copy it in there. I could enter in the name of my church. I could just put my name. I could even upload in this tool a logo. And then I could ask it to, for example, which is my least favorite part of sermon writing, coming up with a title. I don't like coming up with titles.
That's my most favorite. I start with the title.
I'm not a title person, but I could ask it to come up as well. So for me, for example, I like to publish my sermons, and I might ask it to come up with some reflection questions for people to answer, a small group study guide, things like that. So I can ask it to create these tools based on the sermon that I uploaded, and you'll see that it will come up with some titles for me to pick from if I wanted them to, some subtitles. It'll come up with some reflection questions for like a blog post if I wanted to, and I could go in and tweak these however I want to. I asked it to do a 30-minute small group study guide based on the sermon that I wrote, and you'll see that you can also download it as a Word document if you would like, and that Word document you'll see is formatted in a way where it incorporates the logo. So if I have the logo of my church, and it will format it, it'll format it in that nice, neat way. And it'll also then pull some quotes for social media if you were looking for ways that you could share, leverage more, and also come up with some quote graphics that you could post on social media if you want to, incorporating your name, your church's logo, and again, the name of your church. This is just one example of a tool that I'll make sure that Donna has all these links that you can go around and play with. And I tested them, but if you have an issue, let me know. I tested them with the free version of Claude, and you should still be able to play around with them. The other tool that I have, if you rent out your space, taxes are hard, people. Taxes are hard. And this is not meant to be legal. I'm going to preface, not legal advice, but it gives you something to think about. So for example, this is a tool I crafted with Claude that you can interact with, trained on all the tax law, property tax law, income tax law for Delaware and for the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And you can ask it, for example, if Rick, where's your church? What county is your church?
It's in Sussex.
Okay, so I could say I'm in Sussex County. I'm renting just building space. I'm renting to, let's say, a for-profit. There's no mortgage. I'm choosing a flat rate. I'm not providing any of these other things. Let's say we might get 10 to 20% income from that. And they might use a little bit more of our property than we thought, and it's going to be ongoing. You'll see income tax-wise, looks okay. Federal-wise, state-wise, But there's some things we might want to think about for property tax exemption, right?
Okay.
So it gives you some things to think about in terms of, you might want to think about this, and it gives you some follow-up steps as well for things you might want to follow up on in order to get more information. And it helps give you some of the statutes from the Delaware state law that I found and compiled and put together, as well as Maryland as well. Maryland's really easy because they apply it uniformly. Delaware, we're going to break it out by county. So again, so I know church taxes in terms of how you rent space is always, it's always something that's complicated. So this is a tool, for example, you could use to help you navigate how you might approach that, and some things that you can think about if you haven't thought about them already. What else do I have here? I have a tool as well, what I call a consultation tool, where you can upload annual reports. If you have mission insight data that you can get from Donna, or you can ask me to learn more about your community, you put all these pieces of information in there, and you can select whether you want to focus on stewardship or community outreach or whatever other topic you want. And it helps provide you some ideas potentially on other things you can explore in your ministry context, whether it be stewardship or fellowship or outreach. And so it will base it on whatever demographic information you put into it, as well as what other I say annual reports because it would give it an idea of what you've done previously in your congregation, and it could base recommendations off of that. As well, you can include assessment data in that as well, or you could say I don't know, my congregation sort of doesn't have a lot of energy right now, but they're very happy. And so that'll help shape the answer that it gives you also. So again, another tool that you are more than welcome and free to play around with also at another point in time. Couple other...
Okay, let's back up a sec.
Yeah. Carol?
So how did you create these tools?
That's a great question. So I spent a lot of time crafting a prompt in Claude, and you can in Claude you can say I want to help build an app for churches or pastors or sessions, specifying the target, and this is everything I want them to be able to do. And so it basically takes all my words and what I'm hoping that people can be able to do, and it turns all those words into this graphical interface that they can access. And then if there's changes I want to make to it, if I wanted this to be blue, I could go back and say make this blue and it'll make it blue. So it's a way to help leverage. It's a way to leverage AI to help people get more specific type answers based on a program, while also making it a little more what I think is more user friendly in the appearance of it being sort of a more web app interface versus I have to chat with this thing back and forth until I get the answer I'm trying to get. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. That's a great question.
Are you available to work with us to establish it? Are you making yourself available for this?
Yeah, if you have questions, let me know. That's
okay.
I love to talk about this stuff.
Thank you.
If you're a small church, for example, or this is not applicable to all churches, but for example, if you're looking for help making a bulletin because perhaps you're a really small church and you don't have an office admin and you don't know how to format a bulletin in a way that's aesthetic. Again, so I can, for example, I can have it load an example, and it can generate then a bulletin format for you where you just plug in everything that you want it to. And again, in a similar way, I can upload a logo and it will add the logo to the bulletin. And so if you're, again, a small church in particular that doesn't have the staff or the, you don't want to spend as a volunteer hours trying to craft out an aesthetically pleasing bulletin, this would be a tool that you could use to do that. The last tool, I think, I don't know how interesting it'll be to some of you, but I do think budgets are interesting documents. But I think budgets are also interesting in the sense that they can help tell a story. And so I lost.
I need this right now. Thanks.
So, for example, can I find what's like? Yeah. So if I, for example, take just Newcastle Presbytery's budget, and I can say, Newcastle Presbytery, Presbytery. That's how you Presbytery. I wish I knew how to. We'll just say we have. I think we have 47. And then I could copy and paste my bulletin. And I could have it suggest how to group these things in order to tell a story. I can go in and edit them later on. And you'll see then, for example, let's say this salary and housing allowance one. In order, instead of it being an item that says we just pay this much for our pastor, well, why not break that out into percentages based on the category of what they do? So whether it's worship or pastoral care or Christian education, this, as you click into it, it gives you the ability to play around with how those numbers look. And then at the end, you can upload additional documents like an annual report, things like that, and I'll have it write something, but it's going to base it not on a whole lot, but it's going to write ministry narrative, so to speak, to help fill out your narrative budget that you can go tweak later on. So, for example, if I had a more personalized document, this piece about what worship and gather life would look differently. But again, I can download this document then, and I then have a very nice looking narrative budget that I can use, that I can go in and tweak later on, but have a pretty solid head start on this piece in a way that it might save a volunteer, or it might save me as a solo pastor time. So this again isn't going to be another. And Rick, maybe I can email you a link to this after, so you don't have to wait for Donna to upload it. But this is a tool I thought that would be interesting for folks if they're looking for another way to do their budget at the end of the year, instead of it just being a straight, this is our budget. Well, here's a tool that'll let you tell a story about, how you're actually using the money that your church has. So this is like
Casey, I'm curious, roughly how many hours do you think you spent developing this budget tool with AI? Was it one morning or was it 1 week?
It was probably a morning cup of coffee's worth of time.
Yeah, it saves so much time though. Yeah.
Yeah, so it probably took me a few hours to get it to a point that I could now spend as much time as I wanted to really refine it, but to get to this point
to create the tool
where I'm pretty happy with it, it took me maybe like a few hours to
less than half a day. Mm-hmm. Wow.
To create the tool for what the work that this tool now enables, which would have been 2 weeks of work, I would think. Like the tool itself took a half a day to create what would take me a week to put together the actual data.
But now you could easily spend 2 weeks trying to come up with something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Casey, for instance, I'm trying to get grant proposals ready for a nonprofit that I run. Mm-hmm. So something like this budget you've got might be useful then for me to be able to take what I've spent this year and present it in a good fashion. So is this something else you're going to share? I mean, I'm thinking of ways, beyond, it's not just a budget, but how I can use it.
Yeah. I mean, you could use it.
Nonprofit I run, we need grants, we need to go out and find and get some more money. And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is a good way for me to be able to easily create, professional things I can use to send out.
Yeah, I definitely think you could use it in that kind of context. And this will be part of the material that I send out to Donna to make sure everyone has it. And then, I mean, if you are looking for more like stewardship information on this, for example, I mean, like you'll see like then based on, let's say I say there's 46 giving units, it would just break out then average per week what it is you're striving for to do stewardship wise. So like, and again, part of so I also like Claude more than ChatGPT for the reason that Claude has the ability to do this kind of document creation that ChatGPT doesn't really still have the capability that I'm looking for yet. Besides to my own personal ethical liking for Anthropic's Claude versus ChatGPT. But, you know, if you do a paid subscription, or I'm not sure if you can make they call them artifacts, these kind of things online. I'm not sure if you can make it in the free version, but if you spend a morning with it trying to think of like what it is you're trying to create, again, like you can get to this kind of a place where you have a pretty useful tool, I think, for whatever you're trying to do. And again, though, I wouldn't take, you know, all the narrative sections that it generates as just something that I would want to use. I would want to go in and edit and make some tweaks to it.
Right.
But it gives me a very solid starting point, I think. And I know for me as like a solo pastor, when I was serving a small congregation, it would have been nice to like have something that I could have turned to generate this kind of stuff.
You're starting off on second base rather than in the batter's box.
Exactly. Yeah, like a jumping off point, like getting out of the weeds and at least on the field.
So these are just a handful of tools that I've spent some coffee mornings spending time with, trying to figure out how to make something that might be useful for folks here in the Presbytery and in a church setting. So if there's any other tools that you think might be interesting for a church, I'm happy to, you know, spend another morning with a cup of coffee.
I'm sorry to pry a little bit, but so this is a subscription version of Claude that you use, or it's the free version?
I personally have a subscription to Claude, but
I figured
you don't,
because you get a lot out of it. But
yeah, I get a lot out of it. But to use these tools I've made, though, you can have just a free version of Claude. You don't need to have a paid subscription to use it.
No, I get it, and I'm definitely in the unsubscription territory personally.
Yeah.
But good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So those are just some tools that I specifically worked on trying to build, just to show that there are ways that we might think about AI being a possibility of being something useful. I didn't share it, but I have worked on also like a polity one again, because I love AI and polity in ways that you might help navigate like what, you know, different motions look like, Book of Order and Newcastle Presbytery polity policies and stuff like that. So, but there's lots of ways I think that, again, for me, it's the conflicting piece of AI being a useful tool, but also realizing that there's these other costs. So I am also someone who does, you know, a lot of advocating for the fact that we do need more rules and regulations to help govern where we build data centers, if we should build data centers still at the rate that we're doing. So I hope you found some bits of this useful, or it's opened up questions for you. And again, if you want to talk more about AI and ways that you might want to explore, or you might want to tell me like how much I'm just killing the planet, and I'm okay with you telling me that. I'm happy to continue having conversations around AI and how it might be something beneficial for you if you want to explore it. So, were there any other lingering questions or thoughts people had?
This was very worthwhile. This was very worthwhile for me to listen to someone who uses AI so much more than I do, and to see where you go with it and so forth. But then also the Pope Leo's points, and that your creative content is sermons and so forth, and there's so much moral and ethical stuff, which is what AI isn't, and that's what AI is lacking. So I mean, I use it to fix my car radio, or to how not to catch catfish when I'm trying to catch other fish. And I don't have those moral issues there.
Yeah.
So this is very worthwhile. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Ed.
Casey.
All right. Well, then I'm really happy I got to spend this third Thursday with you all. And if you want to send me a message anytime to, look at this more, I'm free to find some time to do that with you all. So I think otherwise, I'm going to wish you all a good rest of your evening.
Awesome.
Same to you, Casey.
Right at 6 o'clock. Thanks, Casey. Thank you.